World War II ended in 1945, but one Japanese soldier kept fighting for 29 more years. He refused to believe Japan had surrendered. Hiro Onoda fought World War II until 1974. 30 people died because he wouldn't accept that the war was over. His commander flew from Japan to a Philippine jungle in 1974 just to tell him, the war ended 29 years ago. Stop fighting. He watched cars, planes, and modern cities appear. Thought it was all American propaganda designed to trick him. For 29 years, he lived in the jungle, surviving, fighting, waiting for orders that would never come from Tokyo. When he finally surrendered in 1974, he was still wearing his 1944 uniform. His rifle still worked. He was ready to keep fighting. March 19, 1922. Kamekawa Village, Wakayama Prefecture, Japan. Hiro Onoda is born into the Empire of Japan during a time when military service is the highest honor a man can achieve. His childhood is shaped by traditional Japanese values: loyalty to the emperor, duty above all else, honor and sacrifice, death before dishonor. Young Hiro grows up hearing stories of samurai warriors who served their lords without question, who died rather than surrender, who valued duty more than life itself. These aren't just stories. They're instructions for how a Japanese man should live. The culture demands absolute obedience. Personal desires mean nothing. Only service matters. In 1939, at 17 years old, Hiro leaves his village to work for Taijima Yoko Trading Company in Wuhan, China. Japan has already invaded China. The war is expanding. Young Japanese men are being drafted constantly. Hiro knows his turn is coming. He accepts this, welcomes it even. Serving the emperor in combat is glorious. Dying for Japan is the ultimate honor. 1942. Hiro is 20 years old. The empire conscripts him into the Imperial Japanese Army. By this point, Japan controls vast territories across Asia and the Pacific. The war against America, Britain, and their allies is expanding rapidly. Japan needs soldiers. Millions of them. Hiro becomes one more conscript among hundreds of thousands. But he won't remain ordinary for long. Military recruiters notice something about Hiro Onoda. He's intelligent, disciplined, capable of independent thinking. Perfect for specialized training that will change his entire life. Hiro Onoda is selected for elite intelligence training at the Futamata branch of the Nakano School. This isn't regular military training. The Nakano School produces Japan's special operations soldiers, intelligence officers, saboteurs, guerrilla fighters, men trained to operate independently behind enemy lines without support or reinforcement. The training is brutal and comprehensive. Guerrilla warfare tactics. How to survive in hostile territory with minimal supplies. How to live off the land. How to evade capture. How to conduct sabotage operations. How to gather intelligence. How to operate completely alone for extended periods. These skills will define the rest of Onoda's life. But the psychological training is even more important than the physical skills. The Nakano School teaches absolute obedience to orders. Never surrender under any circumstances. Never commit suicide. Stay alive and continue fighting no matter what happens. This training contradicts the standard Japanese military code, which encourages soldiers to die rather than be captured. Nakano graduates are different. They're taught to survive and fight indefinitely. Onoda later writes in his memoir that he loved this training. It suited his personality perfectly. The independence, the self-reliance, the challenge of surviving impossible situations. He excels at Nakano School, graduates as a second lieutenant, and receives orders that will send him to a small Philippine island where he'll spend the next 3 decades. December 26, 1944. Lieutenant Hiro Onoda arrives on Lubang Island in the Philippines. His mission is simple. His orders are absolute, and they will destroy his life. Lubang Island, December 1944. A small island 93 miles southwest of Manila. About 125 square kilometers of jungle, mountains, and farming villages. American forces are approaching. The liberation of the Philippines is underway. Japanese forces are losing territory rapidly. Lubang will fall soon. Everyone knows it. Lieutenant Hiro Onoda's mission is straightforward. Destroy the island's airstrip so Americans can't use it. Destroy the harbor pier so they can't land supplies. Conduct guerrilla warfare operations. Harass the enemy constantly. Make them pay for every inch of ground. But when Onoda arrives, senior officers prevent him from destroying the airstrip and pier. They need these facilities themselves. Onoda's mission fails before it begins. February 28, 1945. American and Filipino forces invade Lubang. The Japanese garrison is overwhelmed within days. Most Japanese soldiers are killed or captured. The few survivors scatter into the jungle. Onoda retreats into the mountains with 3 other soldiers: Private Yuichi Akatsu, Corporal Shoichi Shimada, Private First Class Kenshichi Kozuka. Before disappearing into the jungle, Onoda receives final orders from his commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. The major tells him something that will echo in Onoda's mind for 29 years. You are absolutely forbidden to die by your own hand. It may take 3 years, it may take 5, but whatever happens will come back for you. Until then, you are to continue fighting. Never surrender. Major Taniguchi kept his promise. He did come back. It just took 29 years instead of 5. August 15, 1945. Emperor Hirohito announces Japan's surrender in a radio broadcast. World War II ends. Japanese forces across Asia and the Pacific lay down their weapons. Millions of soldiers return home. Prison camps release prisoners. The killing stops, except on Lubang Island. Onoda and his 3 companions hear nothing about the surrender. They're hiding deep in the jungle mountains. No radio, no communication with the outside world. They know Japan was losing when they retreated into the mountains in February. But losing battles doesn't mean losing the war. They wait for orders. Wait for the Japanese military to return and tell them what to do next. October 1945. Leaflets start appearing in the jungle, dropped by American planes. Written in Japanese. They announce that the war has ended. Japan surrendered. All Japanese soldiers are ordered to lay down weapons and report to Allied authorities. They will be treated fairly according to international law. Onoda and his men examine the leaflets carefully. The Japanese looks authentic. The message is clear. But they decide it's propaganda. An American trick designed to make Japanese soldiers surrender. This is standard wartime deception. The Americans want to capture them without fighting. Onoda was trained at Nakano School specifically to resist this kind of psychological warfare. He tears up the leaflets and orders his men to ignore them. This decision, made in October 1945, will cost dozens of lives over the next 3 decades. And Onoda will never waver from it. 1946. Onoda and his 3 companions establish a survival routine. They move camps frequently to avoid detection. Steal food from local Filipino farmers. Rice, bananas, coconuts. Occasionally they kill a cow for meat. The Filipinos report these thefts to authorities. Search parties are organized to find the Japanese holdouts. More leaflets appear. These ones include personal messages. Family members writing to specific soldiers. The war is over. Come home. Your mother is waiting for you. Letters signed by Japanese authorities. Official government seals. Everything looks legitimate. Onoda's group finds these leaflets throughout 1946. Each time they analyze them carefully. Each time they conclude it's elaborate American propaganda. Onoda's reasoning seems logical to him. If Japan really surrendered, why are Americans trying so hard to make them believe it? Why drop leaflets for months? Why would they go to this effort for 4 soldiers on a remote island? The only explanation that makes sense to Onoda is that the war continues. Japan must still be fighting. These messages are just psychological operations trying to weaken Japanese morale. The 4 men adopt strict military discipline. They maintain their weapons, keep watch schedules, conduct reconnaissance patrols, avoid contact with locals, live like soldiers on a combat mission. Because in their minds they are on a combat mission. The war hasn't ended, it's just entered a new phase, and they're still serving the emperor. By the end of 1946, Japanese authorities realize these soldiers aren't surrendering voluntarily. They need a different approach. They send someone the soldiers might actually believe. September 1949. Filipino and Japanese search teams return to Lubang Island. This time they bring family members. Onoda's older brother is among them. He writes personal letters describing family news only the real brother would know. Details about their home village, mother's health, personal memories from childhood. These letters are left in locations where Onoda's group will find them. The 4 soldiers find the letters. Onoda reads his brother's words. For the first time, doubt creeps into his certainty. This information is too specific, too personal. Americans couldn't fake this. But then Onoda's training reasserts itself. The Nakano school taught him that enemy intelligence services are sophisticated. Americans could have captured his brother, tortured him for information, forced him to write letters as psychological warfare. This is exactly what intelligence agencies do. His companions are less certain. Private Akatsu especially struggles with doubt. He's tired of jungle life, tired of stealing food and running from search parties. The letters seem real. Maybe the war really did end. Maybe they should surrender. Onoda shuts down this talk immediately. Doubt is dangerous. Doubt gets soldiers captured or killed. They have orders. Never surrender. Keep fighting until relieved. Those orders haven't changed. October 1950. Private Yuichi Akatsu makes his decision. He leaves the group alone during the night, walks down to the lowlands, surrenders to Filipino authorities. After 5 years in the jungle, Akatsu gives up. Now there are 3, Onoda, Shimada, and Kozuka. And the doubt Akatsu represented is gone. The remaining 3 are absolutely convinced the war continues. After Akatsu surrenders, Japanese authorities bring him back to Lubang. They have him write letters to his former companions. Radio broadcasts feature his voice explaining that the war really ended. Japan surrendered. Come home. The emperor himself has ordered all soldiers to stop fighting. Akatsu stands in clearings shouting messages to the jungle where Onoda's group hides. Onoda, Shimada, and Kozuka watch from concealment. They hear Akatsu's voice, recognize him clearly, and conclude he's been brainwashed by American intelligence, forced to participate in propaganda operations. This confirms everything they believe. The enemy is desperate to capture them. That means they must be important to Japanese military plans. They're tying down enemy resources. They must continue their mission. Their survival tactics become more aggressive. They need food constantly. Stealing crops isn't enough anymore. They start killing farmers' livestock, cows, carabao. This brings them into conflict with local Filipinos. The islanders form armed patrols to protect their property. When these patrols encounter Onoda's group, shooting starts. May 7, 1954. A clash between Onoda's group and Filipino police. Corporal Shoichi Shimada is shot and killed. After 9 years in the jungle, one of Onoda's companions is dead. Now only 2 remain, Onoda and Kozuka. They're both devastated by Shimada's death, but they don't question their mission. Shimada died honorably in combat. That's what soldiers do. They keep fighting. The deaths of Filipino civilians and police continue through the 1950s and 1960s. Onoda and Kozuka believe they're conducting legitimate guerrilla operations. The Filipinos see them as murderers hiding in the jungle. The 1950s pass. Then the 1960s. Onoda and Kozuka develop extraordinary survival skills. They know every trail on Lubang Island, every water source, every hiding spot. They move camps constantly. Never stay in one location long enough to be tracked. Avoid modern technology they see as enemy detection equipment. They watch the island modernize from their jungle hideouts. Roads are built. Electricity arrives. Vehicles become common. Filipinos wear modern clothing. Use transistor radios. The world is changing rapidly. Onoda and Kozuka see all of this as elaborate American occupation propaganda. The real Japan must still be fighting. These developments are just the enemy consolidating control of captured territory. Their weapons are falling apart. The rifles they carried in 1945 are 20 years old. Ammunition is scarce. They carefully maintain every round. Onoda cleans his rifle obsessively. It must function when needed. They make bullets by hand, collect brass casings, reuse gunpowder, create makeshift cartridges. The rifles still fire. Barely, but enough to kill. They age visibly. Onoda is now in his 40s. Kozuka is similar age. Both men are lean, weathered, incredibly fit from decades of jungle survival. They have no mirrors, don't know how much they've changed physically, but they know they've been fighting for over 20 years. Surely Japan will send relief forces soon. Surely their mission will end. They just have to keep fighting a little longer. The 1960s become the 1970s. Onoda is now in his late 40s. He spent more than half his life in the jungle, and he shows no signs of stopping. October 19, 1972. Onoda and Kozuka conduct a reconnaissance patrol near a Filipino village. They're looking for food and supplies. After 27 years, these patrols are routine, dangerous but familiar. They've done this thousands of times. Today will be different. Filipino police have been tracking their movements, setting up ambush positions. This time the patrol walks directly into prepared defensive positions. Gunfire erupts. Kozuka is hit. Falls. Onoda tries to reach him but can't. More shots. Kozuka dies within minutes. Onoda escapes into the jungle alone. For the first time since February 1945, Hiro Onoda is completely alone. No companions. No one to talk to. No one to share guard duties. No one to confirm that his mission makes sense. Just him and the jungle and the ghost of 27 years. He's 50 years old. He spent more than half his life fighting a war that ended 27 years ago. And he still doesn't know it's over. The loneliness is crushing. Humans aren't designed for complete isolation. Onoda talks to himself. Maintains military discipline because structure prevents madness. He still cleans his rifle daily. Still moves camps regularly. Still believes Japan will send relief forces. The alternative is accepting that everything, all 27 years, all the deaths, all the suffering, was for nothing. That's unacceptable. So he keeps fighting. Onoda would remain alone in the jungle for 16 more months, until a Japanese tourist with a backpack and a camera accidentally found him. February 20th, 1974. Norio Suzuki, a 24-year-old Japanese adventurer and dropout, arrives on Lubang Island. Suzuki is traveling the world looking for three things: a panda, the abominable snowman, and Lieutenant Hiro Onoda. He's already failed to find the first two. Onoda is his last chance for adventure. Suzuki doesn't coordinate with authorities, doesn't hire guides, just walks into the jungle alone with camping gear and a camera. He's either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Probably both. He leaves notes in the jungle written in Japanese. Messages saying he wants to meet Lieutenant Onoda. Promises he's not military or police, just a Japanese citizen who wants to talk. February 25th, 1974. Suzuki's campfire at night attracts attention. Onoda approaches cautiously. This young man is clearly Japanese, speaking perfect Japanese, not wearing military uniform, not acting like police. Suzuki introduces himself, says he's from Japan, the real Japan, not the occupied propaganda version Onoda believes in. They talk for hours. Onoda is starved for conversation after 16 months alone. Suzuki tells him about modern Japan, electronics, economic boom, prosperity. Onoda listens but doesn't believe. This is the most sophisticated propaganda attempt yet. A Japanese citizen instead of Americans. Smart psychological operation. Suzuki realizes Onoda won't surrender just from talking. He asks what it would take. Onoda's answer is simple and absolute. Orders from his commanding officer, Major Yoshimi Taniguchi, the same officer who gave him his mission in 1945. Nobody else. Only his commander can relieve him of duty. Norio Suzuki returns to Japan with photographs proving he met Hiro Onoda. The pictures show a weathered man in a tattered 1944 uniform holding a functioning rifle. The Japanese government and media react with shock. Onoda is still alive, still fighting, still absolutely convinced the war continues. After 29 years, the Japanese government faces an enormous problem. They need Major Yoshimi Taniguchi. He's the only person who can give Onoda orders to surrender. But Taniguchi left military service decades ago. He's now a civilian bookseller living a quiet life in Japan. The government locates him, explains the situation, asks him to travel to the Philippines and formally relieve Onoda of duty. Taniguchi is shocked. He never imagined Onoda would still be following those 1945 orders. Never thought his words would keep a soldier fighting for 3 decades. He feels immense guilt. His orders created this situation. His words trapped Onoda in the jungle for 29 years. He agrees immediately to travel to Lubang and end this nightmare. March 9, 1974. Major Taniguchi, now 71 years old and wearing civilian clothes, travels to Lubang Island. He brings Onoda's original orders written in 1945. He brings his military identification, everything needed to prove his identity. Philippine officials coordinate the meeting. They want this resolved peacefully. No more deaths. No more fighting. Just bring Onoda home. After 29 years, Hiro Onoda is about to receive the orders he's been waiting for. Orders that will finally end his war. March 10, 1974. A clearing on Lubang Island. Major Taniguchi waits. He's wearing his old military uniform that barely fits anymore. Norio Suzuki is there to facilitate. Philippine officials stand at a distance. Cameras document everything. This is international news. The whole world is watching. Onoda emerges from the jungle. He's 52 years old but looks ancient. Weathered skin. Lean from decades of minimal food. His uniform is held together with patches and repairs. His boots are homemade from animal hide. His rifle is rusted but still functional. He carries himself like a soldier reporting for duty. He sees Major Taniguchi. Recognition flashes across his face. This is his commanding officer, the man who gave him orders in 1945. Onoda approaches stiffly, stands at attention, salutes. Taniguchi salutes back. Both men are crying. The emotion is overwhelming. 29 years. 29 years of Onoda following orders that should have ended in weeks. Taniguchi reads the formal orders. Lieutenant Onoda, the war ended. Japan was defeated. Your mission is complete. I order you to cease all combat operations immediately. You are relieved of duty. Simple words. Official military language. Exactly what Onoda needs to hear from the only person he'll believe. Onoda salutes again. Presents his rifle, sword, ammunition, hand grenades, and military dagger. All perfectly maintained despite 29 years of jungle humidity. He's ready to go home. Hiro Onoda's war finally ended on March 10, 1974. He'd fought World War II for 10,693 days. Approximately 29 years and 116 days. March 11, 1974. Onoda boards a plane to Manila, then to Tokyo. His first flight since 1944. The technology terrifies and amazes him. Jets didn't exist when he went to war. The planes are massive, fast, comfortable. Nothing like the military transport planes he remembers. Modern Philippines shocked him. Cars everywhere. Electricity. Roads. Buildings. But he could rationalize that as American occupation propaganda. Japan is different. The plane lands at Tokyo's Haneda Airport. Onoda sees modern Japan for the first time. The shock is indescribable. Tokyo in 1974 is a gleaming metropolis. Skyscrapers. Neon lights. Millions of people wearing modern clothing. Cars filling highways. Prosperity everywhere. This isn't the Japan he left in 1944. That Japan was militaristic, focused on war, preparing for American invasion. This Japan is peaceful, wealthy, and utterly foreign to him. Media circus surrounds his arrival. Hundreds of journalists, cameras, questions shouting from all directions. Onoda is overwhelmed. He's been in silent jungle for months. Now this chaos. Officials rush him to a hotel. Try to give him space to adjust. But there is no adjusting. You can't bridge 29 years in a few days. His family visits. They're old. His parents are elderly. Siblings are middle-aged with children of their own. They're strangers. He doesn't know them. They don't know him. The young soldier who left in 1944 is gone. The man who returned is a ghost wearing that soldier's face. Japan didn't know what to do with Hiro Onoda, and Onoda had no idea how to exist in this new world. The Japanese public is divided on Hiro Onoda. Some see him as the ultimate loyal soldier, a man who never gave up, never surrendered, followed orders for 29 years despite impossible circumstances. These people celebrate him. Patriotic organizations invite him to speak. He receives awards, recognition, praise for his dedication and survival. But others see something darker. Onoda killed approximately 30 Filipino civilians and police between 1945 and 1974. These weren't combat deaths. The war was over. These were murders committed by a man refusing to accept reality. The victims' families want justice. They want Onoda prosecuted for killing their loved ones. Philippine authorities consider murder charges. The Philippine government faces political pressure. Charge Onoda and create international incident with Japan, or grant pardons and ignore justice for victims' families. President Ferdinand Marcos chooses diplomacy over justice. He pardons Onoda. All charges dropped. Onoda is free to return to Japan without legal consequences. The victims' families are told to accept this. Many never do. Japanese media largely ignores the Filipino victims. News coverage focuses on Onoda's ordeal, his survival, his loyalty, his suffering. The people he killed are mentioned briefly, if at all. This enrages critics who argue Japan is whitewashing murder, turning a killer into a hero because he wore a uniform and followed orders. The debate becomes bitter, divisive. Onoda can't escape the controversy, can't find peace in Japan, can't reconcile who he was with who he's expected to be. So he leaves. 1975. After 1 year back in Japan, Hiro Onoda leaves permanently. He can't adapt. Modern Japan is incomprehensible to him. The pacifism, the democracy, the prosperity, everything he fought for, the militaristic Japanese empire, is gone, replaced by something unrecognizable. He feels like a man from another century trying to exist in the present. He emigrates to Brazil, buys a cattle ranch in Mato Grosso do Sul, remote, isolated, similar to the jungle in some ways. He can work with his hands, live simply, avoid the media circus and political debates. In Brazil, most people don't know who he is, don't care about World War II or Japanese holdouts. He's just another rancher. That's all he wants to be. He marries a Japanese woman, Machi, in 1976. They live quietly on the ranch, raise cattle, grow crops, the simple life he never had as a soldier. His wife helps him adjust to modern life gradually. Indoor plumbing, electricity, television, radio, all the technology he missed during 29 years in the jungle. She's patient with his difficulties, but Onoda never fully adjusts mentally. He keeps military discipline, wakes early, maintains strict routines, stays physically fit. Old habits from Nakano school training never fade. He's not living in Brazil. He's existing there, going through motions of civilian life while his mind remains partially in 1944, partially in that jungle, partially at war. Brazil gives Onoda what Japan couldn't: distance from his past, space to exist without judgment. But it can't give him peace. 1974. Shortly after returning to Japan, Onoda publishes his memoir, No Surrender, My 30-Year War. The book becomes an international bestseller. Millions read his first-hand account of surviving alone in the jungle, following orders for 3 decades, refusing to believe the war ended. The story is extraordinary, unbelievable, and completely true. But the book reveals something troubling about Onoda's psychology. He shows no remorse for killing Filipino civilians. In his mind, he was conducting legitimate guerrilla warfare, following orders, serving his country. The people he killed were enemy combatants or collaborators. He doesn't apologize, doesn't acknowledge wrongdoing, just explains his actions from his perspective. Western readers are horrified by this lack of remorse. Asian readers familiar with Imperial Japanese military culture understand better. Onoda was indoctrinated to believe orders supersede morality. That duty to the emperor erases personal responsibility. The Nakano school specifically trained him to operate independently without questioning orders. This training worked perfectly. Too perfectly. The book creates the Onoda myth, the loyal soldier, the ultimate warrior, the man who never surrendered. This myth obscures uncomfortable truths, the deaths, the refusal to accept reality, the psychological damage that military indoctrination caused. Popular culture embraces the myth, ignores the complexity, turns Onoda into a symbol rather than a human being. Onoda participates in this myth-making. He gives speeches, appears on television, tells his story repeatedly, but it's always the same sanitized version. Survival and loyalty, never the killing, never the doubt he must have felt occasionally. The myth of Hiro Onoda spreads globally, but the real man remains hidden beneath layers of propaganda, nostalgia, and willful ignorance. 1996. Hiro Onoda returns to Lubang Island for the first time since 1974. He's 74 years old now. He wants to see the place that defined his adult life. the jungle where he spent 29 years, the mountains he knew better than any map. This pilgrimage is complicated, emotional, necessary. The island has changed dramatically. Modern roads, electricity, development. The jungle he knew has been partially cleared for farmland. The trails he memorized are gone. His old campsites are unrecognizable. Everything looks smaller, less threatening, more ordinary. The battlefield of his mind doesn't match current reality. Local Filipinos have mixed reactions to his visit. Some are curious, want to meet the famous holdout. Others are angry, remember family members he killed, see him as a murderer returning to the scene of his crimes. Philippine officials provide security. They don't want violence, but tension is unavoidable. Onoda visits locations where significant events happened. The spot where Shimada died in 1954, where Kozuka died in 1972, where he first met Norio Suzuki in 1974. He's silent during these visits, processing memories and emotions he's suppressed for decades. His wife Machi accompanies him, provides support. She's the only person who understands what this means to him. He also does something unexpected. He donates $10,000 to a local school. It's not an apology. He never apologizes. But it's acknowledgement, recognition that his actions affected this community, that his war had victims. The donation doesn't erase 29 years of violence, but it's the closest Onoda ever comes to expressing regret. 1984. Onoda establishes a nature camp for Japanese children called Onoda Shirzenjuku. The camp teaches survival skills, self-reliance, and traditional values. Children learn to live in wilderness, start fires without matches, find food and water, build shelters, navigate without technology. Everything Onoda learned in the jungle. But the camp also teaches something deeper: discipline, respect for nature, self-sufficiency, independence. These aren't just survival skills, they're life philosophy. Onoda believes modern Japanese children are too soft, too dependent on technology and comfort. They need to learn hardship, need to understand that survival requires strength and determination. Critics argue the camp is indoctrinating children with militaristic values, teaching them to glorify the same obedience that kept Onoda fighting for 29 years. That discipline without critical thinking creates soldiers who follow orders blindly. Onoda dismisses these concerns. He believes he's teaching important lessons, preparing children for difficult futures. The camp runs successfully for decades. Thousands of Japanese children attend. Many later credit the experience with building confidence and resilience. Others describe it as unnecessarily harsh, a strange blend of Boy Scout camping and military discipline. Onoda himself teaches classes occasionally, demonstrates survival techniques, tells edited versions of his jungle experiences. He never tells children about killing Filipino civilians, never mentions the darker aspects of his story. Only survival, only loyalty, only determination. The sanitized myth continues. Onoda shapes how an entire generation of Japanese children understand duty, survival, and sacrifice. Whether that's positive or negative remains debated. The 2000s. Onoda is now in his 80s, still living in Brazil with his wife. His health declines gradually. Age catches everyone eventually, even soldiers who survived impossible circumstances. His body, kept fit through decades of jungle survival, finally weakens. But his mind remains sharp. Memories of the war still vivid. He divides time between Brazil and Japan, maintains both residences, never fully commits to either country, can't fully belong anywhere. Brazil is refuge. Japan is duty. Neither is home. Home was the Imperial Japan of 1944. That nation doesn't exist anymore. Hasn't existed for 70 years. He's a ghost haunting a world that moved on without him. He continues giving occasional interviews, always telling the same story. The mission, the survival, the loyalty. Journalists ask if he has regrets. He always says no. He followed orders, did his duty. That's what soldiers do. He won't apologize for being a good soldier. Won't admit that good soldiers can commit terrible acts. This consistency is either admirable integrity or frightening lack of self-awareness. Young Japanese people discover his story through internet and social media. Some admire his dedication. Others see him as a cautionary tale about blind obedience. historical symbol of Imperial Japan's darkest characteristics. The debate continues decades after his war ended. His wife Machi remains devoted. She understood who she married, accepted his trauma and rigidity, gave him the stable life he needed. January 16, 2014. Hiro Onoda dies in Tokyo at age 91. Heart failure. Natural causes. The last famous Japanese holdout is gone. Hiro Onoda's death closes a strange chapter of World War II history. He was the last well-known Japanese holdout. Other soldiers refused surrender after 1945. Some were found in the 1950s and 1960s. But Onoda lasted longest, fought hardest, became most famous. His 29-year war captures imagination because it seems impossible. Yet it happened. His legacy is deeply complicated. To some, he represents ultimate loyalty and dedication. A man who never broke his oath, never abandoned his duty, followed orders under circumstances that would destroy most people. This perspective celebrates Onoda as the ideal soldier, discipline and obedience above all else. To others, Onoda represents the danger of military indoctrination. A man so thoroughly programmed that he couldn't accept reality, who killed innocent people because he couldn't question his orders, who wasted 29 years and dozens of lives because admitting mistake was impossible. This perspective sees Onoda as tragedy and warning. The truth contains both perspectives. Onoda was extraordinarily dedicated and dangerously indoctrinated. Survivor and killer. Victim and perpetrator. His story reveals what happens when military culture values obedience more than independent thinking. When soldiers are trained so thoroughly that they can't adapt when circumstances change. The Filipino families who lost loved ones to Onoda's bullets have their own perspective, one that's rarely heard in Japanese and Western media. They see a murderer who escaped justice because international politics mattered more than their dead. All these perspectives are true simultaneously. That's what makes Hiro Onoda's story so disturbing and so important. How does a person refuse to believe reality for 29 years? Psychologists have studied Onoda's case extensively. His delusion wasn't random. It was systematic, built on layers of training, belief, and cognitive mechanisms that protected him from accepting uncomfortable truths. First, the Nakano school training created foundational beliefs. Never surrender. Never trust enemy information. Assume all evidence of defeat is propaganda. These weren't suggestions. They were absolute commands drilled into Onoda's psyche. Questioning them meant betraying the emperor, betraying Japan, betraying everything he was taught to value. Second, cognitive dissonance. The longer Onoda fought, the harder it became to accept he was wrong. If the war ended in 1945, that meant everything since then was meaningless. Shimada died for nothing. Kozuka died for nothing. The Filipino civilians died for nothing. 29 years wasted. That psychological cost was too high. Easier to maintain the delusion than accept that magnitude of mistake. Third, confirmation bias. Onoda interpreted every piece of evidence through his existing beliefs. Modern technology, American occupation propaganda, prosperous Philippines, elaborate deception, personal letters from family, forced under torture. His brain automatically filtered information to support his worldview. This is normal human psychology. Onoda's case was extreme but not fundamentally different from how everyone processes contradictory information. Fourth, isolation. Alone in the jungle, Onoda had no one to challenge his beliefs. No outside perspectives. Just his own thoughts echoing endlessly. Isolation amplifies whatever beliefs you already hold. Understanding Onoda's psychology doesn't excuse his actions, but it explains how a rational person can maintain irrational beliefs for decades. Hiro Onoda wasn't the only Japanese soldier who refused to surrender after World War II. Dozens of holdouts were discovered across the Pacific. Some surrendered quickly when they learned the truth. Others resisted for years. Onoda lasted longest among the famous cases. But he wasn't alone in his delusion. Shoichi Yokoi hid in Guam's jungles for 28 years. Discovered in 1972, 2 years before Onoda. Yokoi believed the war continued but admitted he suspected it might have ended. He hid from shame. Fear of punishment for surviving when he should have died. Different psychology than Onoda but similar result. Decades in hiding. Teruo Nakamura, an ethnic Taiwanese soldier in the Japanese army, was found in Indonesia in 1974, 6 months after Onoda. He'd hidden for 29 years. Unlike Onoda, Nakamura wasn't fighting, just surviving, avoiding detection. He seemed relieved when discovered, ready to stop hiding. These men represent different responses to the same impossible situation. Soldiers trained to never surrender, told the enemy would torture and kill prisoners, indoctrinated to believe death was preferable to capture. When the war ended, these beliefs didn't disappear. They adapted, evolved into reasons to keep hiding, keep fighting, keep denying reality. The Japanese government struggled with how to handle returning holdouts, heroes or embarrassments, symbols of loyalty or reminders of Imperial Japan's darkest characteristics. The answer depended on politics, on timing, on public mood. But all the holdouts shared one thing: military training that prepared them for war but not for peace. That's the real crime of their story. The story of Hiro Onoda usually focuses on Onoda himself, his survival, his loyalty, his dedication. But approximately 30 people died because of his refusal to surrender. Their stories are rarely told, their names mostly forgotten. They deserve to be remembered. Filipino farmers killed while working their fields. Police officers shot during patrols. Civilians caught in firefights between Onoda's group and search parties. These weren't soldiers dying in combat. They were people trying to live their lives on an island that should have been peaceful after 1945. One victim was a father of 4, shot in 1952 while checking his rice fields. He never saw his attacker, just fell dead. His children grew up without him. His wife struggled to survive alone. Onoda never learned his name, never cared to. He was just enemy combatant in Onoda's mind. Another victim was a young police officer, 23 years old, killed in 1965 during a patrol looking for the holdouts. He'd been on the force less than a year, had a fiancée waiting for him. She never got married. Spent her life waiting for a man who died because another man couldn't accept reality. The 1974 pardon that freed Onoda also denied these families justice. No trial, no accountability, no acknowledgement of their suffering. Philippine President Marcos chose diplomacy over their grief, chose international relations over their dead. The families had no choice but to accept this. When we celebrate Onoda's survival, we should remember what it cost, who paid the price for his loyalty, whose lives ended so his mission could continue. Hiro Onoda's story changed how militaries think about training. His case revealed the danger of absolute obedience without critical thinking. Modern military doctrine tries to balance discipline with adaptability, orders with initiative, but it's a difficult balance. Armies need soldiers who follow commands, but not soldiers who follow commands blindly for 29 years. Western militaries studied Onoda's case extensively, used it in training courses, asked officers and enlisted personnel, at what point should a soldier question orders? When does loyalty become dangerous? How do you teach independent thinking without undermining military discipline? These are difficult questions with no perfect answers. The Nakano School's training methods were effective, too effective. They created soldiers who couldn't be broken, couldn't be deceived, couldn't be convinced to abandon their missions. In wartime, these qualities are valuable. In peacetime, they're catastrophic. Modern special forces training tries to avoid this problem, teaches soldiers to adapt, to assess situations independently, to know when orders no longer apply. But militaries still need obedience, still need soldiers who follow commands even when those commands are difficult or dangerous. The line between good soldier and Hiro Onoda is thinner than anyone wants to admit. Every military culture risks creating soldiers so dedicated they can't function when circumstances change. Onoda's story is taught at military academies worldwide, not as inspiration, as warning. This is what happens when training works too well. The goal is creating soldiers who fight effectively but can also stop fighting when the war ends. Onoda proves that's harder than it sounds. Even after his death, fundamental questions about Hiro Onoda remain unanswered. Did he really believe the war continued for 29 years? Or did doubt creep in that he couldn't admit even to himself? Was he truly loyal or just too proud to admit mistake? These questions matter because they determine how we judge him. Hero or victim? Dedicated soldier or delusional killer? Onoda's own statements are contradictory. Sometimes he claimed absolute certainty the war continued. Other times he admitted noticing evidence that troubled him. Modern Philippines. Peaceful occupation. Prosperity that didn't match his expectations of American military government. He saw these things, noted them, but explained them away because accepting them meant accepting his entire mission was mistake. There's evidence Onoda experienced doubt. Private Akatsu's surrender in 1950 shook him. Shimada's death in 1954 devastated him. Decades alone after Kozuka died in 1972 were psychological torture. But Onoda never let doubt win. Never let it change his actions. That's either remarkable dedication or tragic stubbornness depending on perspective. The biggest question, could Onoda have stopped earlier if he'd wanted to? Or was he genuinely trapped by his training and beliefs? If we believe he could have stopped, he's responsible for everything that happened. If we believe he couldn't, he's victim of military indoctrination. Both might be true simultaneously. We'll never know what Onoda truly believed. He took those answers to his grave. What we do know is that his story reveals uncomfortable truths about duty, obedience, and the cost of never questioning authority. Hiro Onoda's story reveals Japan's complicated relationship with World War II history. His reception as returning hero rather than war criminal reflects how Japan struggles to confront its imperial past. The celebrations, the praise, the awards, these weren't just about Onoda. They were about what he represented. A connection to Imperial Japan that some Japanese people miss. Conservative Japanese groups embraced Onoda as symbol of traditional values. Loyalty to emperor, duty above self, never surrendering. These values defined Imperial Japan. Modern democratic Japan officially rejects them, but nostalgia remains. Some Japanese people, especially older generations, remember Imperial era with pride despite its atrocities. Onoda represented that era surviving into the modern world. Progressive Japanese groups were horrified by Onoda's reception. They saw a dangerous glorification of militarism. Celebrating a man who refused to accept defeat meant celebrating refusal to accept Japan's war crimes. Celebrating loyalty to the emperor meant celebrating the system that launched aggressive wars across Asia. The debate became proxy for larger arguments about Japanese identity and historical memory. The Filipino victims barely registered in Japanese public consciousness. Their deaths were unfortunate but secondary to Onoda's survival story. This selective memory reflects how nations construct historical narratives. Focus on our suffering. Minimize others' pain. Remember our heroes. Forget our victims. Japan isn't unique in this. All nations do it. But Onoda's case makes the process transparent and uncomfortable. How Japan remembers Hiro Onoda reveals how Japan remembers World War II. Incompletely. Selectively. Controversially. 2021. Director Arthur Harari releases Onoda, 10,000 Nights in the Jungle. A French-Japanese film depicting Onoda's story. The film runs nearly 3 hours. Covers his training, his mission, his decades in the jungle, his eventual surrender. It's visually stunning, historically detailed, and morally ambiguous. The film doesn't glorify Onoda, but it doesn't condemn him either. Just presents his story without clear judgment. Shows his dedication and his delusion, his survival skills and his victims. The film's ambiguity frustrated some viewers. They wanted clear hero or clear villain. The film offers neither. Just a complex human being trapped in impossible circumstances. Critics praised the film's refusal to simplify Onoda's story. The cinematography captures the jungle's beauty and danger. The lead actor, Endo Yuya, portrays Onoda's transformation from young soldier to weathered holdout convincingly. The film shows time's passage through Onoda's aging, his companions' deaths, the jungle's gradual changes. But the film also sparked controversy. Some argued it was too sympathetic to Onoda, that showing his perspective legitimized his actions. Others said it didn't adequately represent Filipino victims, that focusing on Onoda's internal experience erased the people he killed. These criticisms reflect ongoing debates about how to tell stories of controversial historical figures. The film introduced Onoda's story to new generations, young people who'd never heard of Japanese holdouts, who couldn't imagine refusing to accept reality for decades. Art keeps historical stories alive, but art also shapes how we remember those stories. The 2021 film ensures Onoda won't be forgotten. Whether that's good or bad remains debated. Hiro Onoda's story is ultimately about belief, how beliefs form, how they're maintained despite contradictory evidence, how they shape actions even when those actions become destructive. His story is extreme, but the underlying psychology is universal. Everyone holds beliefs that resist evidence. Everyone filters information through existing worldviews. Onoda just took this to deadly extremes. Consider modern parallels. People who maintain political beliefs despite overwhelming contrary evidence. Conspiracy theorists who explain away every contradiction. Religious extremists who commit violence for beliefs that seem obviously false to outsiders. The psychology isn't different from Onoda's. Just the specific beliefs and consequences change. Onoda believed the war continued because accepting alternative meant psychological devastation. Modern people maintain false beliefs for similar reasons. Admitting you're wrong about fundamental beliefs means admitting wasted time, energy, relationships. The sunk cost fallacy applies to beliefs as much as investments. The longer you believe something, the harder it becomes to change that belief. Onoda's isolation made his delusion worse. No opposing viewpoints. No challenges to his thinking. Modern internet creates similar echo chambers. People surround themselves with information confirming existing beliefs. Avoid contradictory evidence. Build worldviews as resistant to change as Onoda's was. The difference is consequences. Onoda's delusion killed people. Most modern delusions just waste time or damage relationships. But the psychological mechanisms are identical. Understanding Onoda means understanding how all humans maintain beliefs despite evidence. His story is warning about what happens when belief becomes absolute. Focus on Hiro Onoda's survival obscures what he lost. 29 years. His entire young adulthood. His 20s, 30s, and 40s spent in jungle fighting imaginary war. Those years can't be recovered. Can't be relived. They're just gone. He lost normal human experiences. Career development. Marriage and children during prime years. Friendships. Travel. Cultural experiences. Education. Everything civilians in their 20s and 30s experience, all sacrificed to mission that ended before it began. He rejoined society at 52, too old to start over, too damaged to fully participate. He lost psychological wholeness, the isolation, the violence, the years of hypervigilance. These created permanent trauma. PTSD wasn't diagnosed, but he clearly suffered from it. Nightmares, difficulty trusting people, inability to relax, constant readiness for combat that never came. His marriage worked because Machi accepted his damage, adapted to his limitations. Most people couldn't have done that. He lost connection to his own country. The Japan he loved, Imperial Japan, was gone. Modern Japan was foreign, democratic, pacifist, wealthy, everything opposite of the nation he fought for. He was man without country, without time period. Ghost haunting a world that moved on without him. Most tragically, he lost the ability to admit loss. Pride prevented him from acknowledging that 29 years were wasted, that people died unnecessarily, that his loyalty was misplaced. This inability to grieve his losses meant they controlled him forever. Hiro Onoda survived 29 years in the jungle. But survival isn't the same as living. He survived. He never truly lived again. Hiro Onoda's story contains no simple moral, no clear lesson, just complicated truth about duty, obedience, belief, and the cost of never questioning authority. He was extraordinarily dedicated and tragically misguided. Survivor and killer, hero and villain, all simultaneously. The military training that made him an effective soldier also destroyed his life. The loyalty that kept him fighting made him unable to stop fighting when he should have. The discipline that helped him survive made him unable to adapt when circumstances changed. These contradictions define his story. He followed orders perfectly. That's what soldiers are trained to do. But perfect obedience to 1945 orders in 1974 was madness. The virtue became vice. The strength became weakness. This transformation happens gradually, imperceptibly, until one day you're standing in jungle killing farmers because orders given 29 years ago said to never surrender. Was Hiro Onoda a good man? Bad man? The question itself is wrong. He was man-shaped by specific training in specific historical moment. That training created specific outcomes. Judge the system that created him more than the man himself. Judge imperial Japanese military culture that valued death over surrender, loyalty over reality, obedience over independent thought. Onoda died believing he'd done right thing, followed orders, served his country, did his duty. He never apologized, never expressed regret. Whether that's admirable integrity or tragic inability to self-reflect depends on who you ask. Both answers are defensible. Both are incomplete. Hiro Onoda fought World War II for 29 years. He won every battle. He lost everything that mattered. That's his legacy. That's his truth. Complicated, uncomfortable, impossible to forget. December 1944 to March 1974. Hiro Onoda fought World War II for 10,693 days, 29 years. He killed approximately 30 people after the war ended. He survived alone in the jungle for months after his last companion died. He refused every attempt to convince him the war was over. His commanding officer finally ordered him to surrender in 1974. Onoda obeyed immediately. Perfect soldier to the end. He died in 2014 at age 91. He never apologized for the people he killed. Never admitted his mission was a mistake. Never questioned his loyalty. Hiro Onoda's story is about dedication, delusion, and the cost of absolute obedience. Some soldiers never stop fighting. Some wars never end. Remember Hiro Onoda. And remember what belief without doubt can cost.